All right. So this is the Programming Foundations in C# Week 1 lecture. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and pull up Visual Studio. Move that over here. There we go. So we're going to go over a few things today, including comments, variables, data types, operators, Boolean logic, strings, and type conversion. And rather than going over each of these subjects and just saying, this is what it is, this is how it works, and just basically giving you dictionary definitions of each item and a few examples of how to use it, I thought today we could do something a little more fun. And as we're learning these constructs, we'll build something that's kind of cool. So we're going to go ahead today and we're going to build a vending machine that will take user input of the number of quarters you put in and the directory you want, like A4 or C2, whatever the location of the beverage or candy you want is. And then it will check and see if there are enough quarters, and it will check and see that location, if there is any inventory in that location, and it will return that, say it's a Twix bar, it will return whatever the item is if everything is met. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. We'll do a console app.NET Core. I'll go ahead and call this one vending machine. Then we wait for that to load. There we go. So the first thing I want to go over in making this is comments. So comments are used to add additional notes or instruction in your code, kind of explain what your code's doing. Whatever you put inside of a comment, it doesn't actually get processed or ran. The compiler just skips right over it. It's only there for the purposes of writing and reading code. So a comment, you can do it a few different ways. The main way to do a one-line comment is just 2 forward slashes. If you do 2 forward slashes, you can see that it turns green, and then you can put a comment there. So I'll go ahead and say this program will be a vending machine program. The other way you can make a comment is a multi-line comment, and that's where you do because right now if I start writing here, it's no longer a comment, so it's looking for actual code. But if I want a comment that spans multiple lines, I don't want to put backslashes over each one. So you do \**. This is a multi-line comment. I can keep going on more lines. And then to close it, you add your \* there. But it has to be up against the asterisk. So that closes off the multi-line comment. Comments are very useful. They help you kind of narrate what your code is doing and allow others to, and yourself when you go back after a time of not touching your code, to see what you were doing, what your thought process was. Now comments are, someone drawing on my screen? Let me clear that off real quick. All right. So comments are useful, but they also can detract from writing code properly if used too much or in an incorrect manner. What I mean by that is when we create variables or methods, or when we build anything that we give a name to, we don't want to use names like X or Y or name. What we want to do is be more specific and say something like customer name. Or instead of just ID, we would have employee ID, right? You want to use very specific names that tell exactly what you're doing. And if that's the case, using specific names that actually illustrate what you're trying to accomplish, that mitigates the need for using a lot of comments. So take that into account as you go forward. Let's see. And we are off. So I'm checking the comments here. Someone sent a comment. Oh, you're good. You're good. Okay. So let's go ahead and start this program. So what we want to happen is we want the user to input both a number of quarters that they're putting into the machine, as well as what they want. So the first thing we can do is display some information to them. We need to display what we have available in our vending machine, what the location is for each of those items, and what the cost is. So let's go ahead and create some variables. So variables they're like a bucket that you can put a value into. You put some data into it, and then anytime you call that bucket by its name, you are referring to that data that was placed into it. In essence, it's like a name, like a human name. Each individual is characterized by a bunch of properties and attributes that individual possesses. Now, if I showed you a picture of a bunch of different individuals, a group of people, you could only tell me what they look like based on the picture. That's all you could tell me. And you couldn't refer to them without referring to the properties that make up that individual, each individual. Therefore, we assign a name to a person so that anytime you say the name, anytime I say Turner, I know that I'm talking about Turner. And then whoever I'm talking to knows exactly who I'm talking about, given that they know that person. A variable is the same. It's a name that we give to a piece of data that anytime we use that name, that variable name, we're referring to that data. So for example, I can create a string, and I will say item 1 name. I'll set it equal to Twix. That will be our first item. So our variable has 3 parts here. It has a data type, it has a name, and it has a value. So we'll talk about data types. Actually, we'll go ahead and talk about that right now. There are different types of data in programming in C#. A string is it's textual data, so anything that's just text. And the reason it's called string is because it's a string of characters. This is a capital T, a W, an I, and an X, all strung together. If you have just one character and you want there to be no more than one character, you would use char, which stands for character. So let's say char middle initial equals C. Notice that a character is represented by single quotations and a string is represented by double quotations. You cannot mix those. In JavaScript you can. You guys have all done a little bit of JavaScript. You can mix them. In C#, double quotes are for strings and single quotes are for characters. Some other type of data that we would deal with is numeric data. Stuff like integers, whole numbers, or decimal places, floats, doubles, decimal. Those are data types that allow us to work with numbers. So we can perform mathematical equations, operations, checks to see if something's greater than or less than another number. So those are all different types of data that we have. So for now, let's go ahead and continue on with our vending machine application. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make 3 different items here. So item 2 name equals Snickers. Item 3 name equals Reese's. Spell that right? 2 E's there. I'm going to Google if I'm spelling that correctly. Nope. There we go. That's how you spell it. 2 E's. All right. And that is lesson number 1 about being a programmer, is you will Google things all the time, even if it doesn't have anything to do with programming. All right, so there's our 3 options. Let's go ahead and display those 3 options to the user. So we can do that with console write line. So console write line will allow us to output or log or print, those are all synonymous terms, some data or strings to the console so the user can see them. So let's go ahead and say, please select an option. There we go. And before that, we'll go ahead and say console.writeLine. Candy available.
What's up, nerds?
Plus. Then we're going to concatenate item 1 name here. So anywhere I put this variable, it's going to reference this string right here. So this will say candy available and then Twix, because that's the value that this variable is referencing. So we can go ahead and add a space there. And we'll go item 2 name, add a space here, and item 3 name. And while we're at it, let's go ahead. I want these to be separated by a comma, so I'm going to add a comma here. So what will happen is this will print out candy available, colon, and then it will print out our Twix, comma, Snickers, comma, Reese's, because that's what the variables are pointing at. Now, last thing I want to do here is I'm going to add a console.readLine, and I'll actually show you why. Let me comment this out for a second. Remember, 2 forward slashes is a comment, so this is now not going to be executed. It's commented out. So if I run this, it starts and then it finishes. You don't even see anything. And the reason is that's because it ran this, it printed out this, then it printed out this line right here, and then the program's over, so it closes. If I want to keep it open so that I can see what's there, I add a console read line, and that will wait for user input. That will wait for the user to hit enter. That way I can see what's going on. So if I run it now, there we go. Candy available, Twix, Snickers, Reese's, please select an option. If I hit enter, it closes out. So let's go ahead and add some data talking about these. We're going to go ahead and add string item 1 location. Set that equal to A1. Item 2 location equals A2. And item 3 location equals A3. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some Boolean expressions. What Boolean means is that it is an expression that renders either true or false. For example, if I say item 1 name equals item 2 name with a double equals, then that's either true or false. It either does equal it or it does not equal it. And because it's Twix and Snickers, they are not equal, so it's false. If I say 1 is greater than 3, that is either true or false. That statement can either be true or false. That statement specifically is always false because 1 is not greater than 3. But if I had 2 variables, such as an integer I and an integer x, where I equals 1 and x equals 3, and I say I is greater than x, Well, that could be true, but let's check what the values are first. So if I had something like this, int I equals 1, int x equals 3, there's an example of bad variable names, poorly chosen variable names. And then if I say or let's go bool. Bool is another data type. It yields either true or false. Boolean, my bool equals I is greater than x. This is a Boolean expression right here. It is either true or false. We know by looking at this that it is false because 1 is not greater than 3. But these could be values input from a user. So we don't know what they are, and we're checking whether they're true or false. And that leads us to this right here. This little character is known generically as an operator. So operators allow us to perform an operation on 2 or more different operands. And an operand is just the data that we're performing the operation on. So for example, the operator you've seen so far is this. A single equals takes 2 sides, a value and a variable, and it assigns, and the equal sign is our assignment operator, this value to this variable. Some other operators we have are a double equals sign, which is our evaluation. This checks to see if 2 things are equal rather than assigning a value to it. Then we have all of our arithmetic operators, minus, plus, divide, multiply. And then we have operators that yield a Boolean expression such as greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, not equal. These are all operators. They perform an operation. Let's take addition, for example. 5 plus 7. This operator takes the number on either side and adds them together, yielding the result of the sum of both of them, which is 13 in this example. So using operators, we can then take the Boolean logic there, and we can make a decision based off of something. So we could say something like, if, let's go ahead and create some variables here, int age equals 19. If age is greater than or equal to 21, console.log, no, console.writeLine, person is legally, person can legally drink. Else, so if this isn't true, else console.writeLine, person cannot legally drink. So let's see what happens here. If I run this, the first line printed out is person cannot legally drink. However, if I change the age to 21, save it and run, we see that person can legally drink. So that's how we can tell the computer to make a decision. We use an if, so this is a conditional, and then we put a Boolean expression in there. The Boolean expression is the result of a Boolean operator, so greater than or equal to, greater than, less than equal to, not equal to, or our double equals, which checks for equality. And then if this evaluates to true, then it does whatever code you put inside of this opening and closing curly bracket. However, if it's false and we put an else here, it will do this. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start adding some functionality here to our items. So let's get some user input here. It says, please select an option. So let's create a variable. It'll be a string. It will be called user input. And we will set that equal to console.readline. Console.readline returns a string that is whatever the user inputs, and then we can assign it to this variable. Now, we need, if I run this right now, I can't tell how to select a Twix, a Snickers, or a Reese's. So I need to show their locations so that the user knows what to do. So let's go ahead and change this up a little bit. We'll go ahead and say item 1 location plus this plus item 1 name. That way we can display that. I'm going to go ahead and do that for each of the items. Write a new line. So item 2 location, item 3 location, and then item 2 name, item 3 name. And then it says please select an option. I'm going to go ahead and make this, I'll make it console.write so I can get, I'll show you why. That will make it so that the user input will be taken from the current line instead of a line down. And then we'll just go ahead and log back out whatever they chose. So console.writeLine user input. We'll go ahead and say you chose plus that. There we go. So let's run this. Now I can see I've kind of got some choices. If I put an A3, it says you chose A3. Well, that's nice, but if I go to a vending machine and I put in A3, I don't want it to give me back something saying you chose A3. I want it to give me a Reese's. So let's go ahead and write some conditionals that allow us to get back the item name based on what we put in there. So how could we do that? We have these, and when we get one of these, we want to check to see what the user input matches. If the user input matches one of these, we want to return the candy relative to the user input. So we can use an if statement like we were just talking about. If user input is equal to, make sure you use double equals there, otherwise it's an assignment operator and it won't work, is equal to A1, and it is case sensitive. If user input is equal to A1, console.writeLine, and let's just go ahead and send back item 1. Then I could say else, whoops, oh there we go. Else if user input is equal to A2, let me move that down here. Console.writeLine, item 2 name. Else if user input equals A3, console.writeLine, item 3 name. There we go. Now let's go ahead and add a default as well. So else console.writeLine. I'm sorry, that is not a valid option. So notice here, we start with an if statement. And if will evaluate this Boolean expression, and if it is true, it will perform this. And then it will skip all of these other ones because this was true. Else if is saying, if this was not true, let's check and see if this statement is true. Else if neither of those are true, then we'll check and see if this yields true. And if any of these evaluate to true, then we're going to say else do this. So the final else clause does not check for a statement. It's just saying if none of these are true, then do this. So let's see what happens now. So here we go. Let's select an option. I'm going to go ahead and select A2. I got my Snickers back. I'm happy. So let's go ahead now. Let's see what happens if I choose something that doesn't exist. Let's choose B1. I'm sorry, that is not a valid option. Awesome. So as the user, I'm pretty happy right now. I can go ahead and get my Snickers or whatever candy bar I want. However, as the person who owns the vending machine, it's not really that great because I'm not getting anything. Anyone can put in whatever they want and they just get my candy. So that's not great. So let's go ahead and add a price to everything. Now, let's say the price is going to be double, and we'll go item 1 price equals 125. Item 2 price equals 150, and item 3 price equals 175. So there we go. So now I've got prices. So inside of my my if statements, I want to make sure that I also put in enough money, right? So let's go ahead and add, well, before we check that, we need to actually put in the money. So our money is not going to actually be a double. We're going to use an integer, and the integer will represent the number of quarters that we put in. So let's go this, we'll say int num of quarters, and we're going to set this equal to console.readline as well because it's going to be input. However, this is underlined red. IntelliSense is telling me this can't happen, and it says cannot implicitly convert type string to int. Remember how earlier I said console.readline returns a string, which is why we can store it in a variable of type string. However, this variable is of type int, so we can't do that. So what we need to do is try to parse or convert that string into an integer. So I can do that by saying int.parse, passing this in. Miss something? int32. There we go, int32.parse. So this will allow us to convert the string into an integer. Now, if what's passed in is not an integer, like it's a word like hello, that will cause an error. And we could add error checking to that. For now, we're not going to. So now we've got num of quarters. So we could go ahead and put right here, here's the second piece to Boolean expressions, and or. So this represents and this represents or. It works just like any language. It's a logical expression. If I tell you I'm going to trade you this Pokemon card for that Pokemon card and $2, that doesn't mean you can give me one or the other. That means I want both. If I say or, then you can give me one or the other. So that's how it works. So in my statement here, I can say if the user input is equal to A1 and num of quarters is equal to, now how am I going to do this? I've got num of quarters, which is an integer, and I've got item price, which is a double. So I need to, and it's based on 25 cents. So I want to go ahead and see the number of quarters is equal to, let's see here, item 1 price divided by 0.25. Right? And I don't know if that's going to return an integer actually, so we'll have to check that. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Yeah, I hear you. Very cool. All right, what do you got?
So I want A1. Oh, and then I need to prompt the user for the number of quarters. So let's go ahead and say That would be 5/4. I got my Twix back. Good. Now I don't need it to be just equal to. I need it to be greater than or equal to, right? And let's go ahead and prompt the user here. Console.write, enter number of quarters. Group these together a little more nicely. There we go. So let's try it. If I put in 4/4, so I want A1, and I put in 4/4, I'm sorry, this is not a valid option. Now that's kind of a vague message, right? I don't want to tell the user, I'm sorry, this is not a valid option, because it is a valid option. A1 is very valid, but they didn't put in enough money. So we need to separate this out here. We don't want an and here just because they don't belong together, because we want to give a different message. So we want to go ahead and say, inside of this, we can nest another if statement, and we'll say if this, then we can go ahead and console write line here. Otherwise, so else, console.write line, not enough money. And then let's go ahead and say, since there's not enough money, we also want to return the number of quarters they gave us. Returning quarters. And we'll go ahead here and say number of quarters plus quarters. Makes it look like we're returning some quarters. So let's try that out now. If I run this, I come here and I say I want A1, and I put in 4/4. Not enough money, returning quarters. There's my 4/4 back. So let's go ahead and build this up for the rest of them. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this. And I can leave this item price divided by 25 because this is a variable, but I need to change it to item 2. And I need to change this to item 2, and then we're good. And that's part of the value of having variables is I can just put the variable in there. I don't even remember what it is. I can put the variable in there, and it does its work. So we'll go ahead and paste this one more time here. Change this to item 3, and this to item 3. And now it should work for all 3 of my items. So let's go ahead and run that. We'll try it out. I want A2. I'm going to put in 5/4. Oh, whoops. I put that in wrong. So it's going to give me. Oh, there we go. So I put in D for the number of quarters. Well, D cannot be converted to a integer, so it threw an exception. So let's go ahead and try this again. So I want A2. I'm going to put in 5/4. 5 is not enough. It returns the quarters. If I run that again, let's put in 6/4 this time. Actually, let's put in 8/4. A2, 8/4. I got my Snickers. It's over. But wait a second. 8/4 is $2, and the Snickers is only $1.50. So that doesn't really, I don't want just the Snickers back. I want my change back as well. So let's go ahead and code that. So let's set number of quarters Let's set that equal to let's set it equal to the number of quarters minus the item 1 price divided by 0.25. Not question mark. That needs to be divided. So we'll go ahead and do this. Let's do some error. And we'll cast that. I don't want to get into casting.
Yeah, because when you create those controllers, it fills out all those paths and stuff for you.
Let's see.
NBC stuff is that
Let's see if we can do this with a parse.
that when it goes wrong, it's really hard to pinpoint it. And which
No.
handle?
All right. Sorry, I don't want to get into cat. No, you know what? We can get it. I'm going to put this here for now, but not go too far into it.
Yeah.
Let me see something real quick here. No, I wouldn't use modulus because modulus works a little differently and that just returns the remainder. But what I'm trying to do is get the number here, but that's a double and you can't just convert. Or you can cast it, and that's a little bit above what we're supposed to go over here. So I ran into something. Let me grab something. We'll go over it real quick anyways. Cast. Good question though, Ryan. There we go. So in order to convert that double, we can just use convert dot to int 32. So there we go. Convert dot to int 32 will convert the double into an integer. So now this looks like it's getting kind of complicated, but let's break it up a little bit, just a little. So number of quarters is the input number of quarters. We're going to set this equal to the current number of quarters minus the item price divided by 0.25, because basically we're converting the item price into a number of quarters and we're minusing it from there. So at that point, we'll go ahead and return whatever the item is, and we'll go ahead and return the change, which will be some quarters. So num of quarters plus quarters. There we go. So let's see what happens here. If we grab these lines here, and then grab this line here, paste that on each one. Really, we want to return the quarters there. So now let's see what happens. If I put in A2 and I put in 10 quarters, I got back Snickers and 5 quarters. So that's awesome. Now let's take a look at this code real quick. I have this line in a lot of places, this quarters return. And it looks like almost every option, no matter what happens, I return the number of quarters. So what I can really do there is place that outside of all the options and then delete it from all these because I get back the number of quarters every time. So let's go ahead and make use of that logic and not write this line over and over again. There we go. So now no matter what, it will go through all these options, and at the end it will give me whatever quarters are left over back. Let's test it out to make sure that works. I want A3. Now I'll put in 20 quarters. Got my Reese's and my 15 quarters back. Now if I select something that doesn't exist, like B3, put in 50 quarters, I just get my 50 quarters back. So that's super nice, but there's still one thing missing. If I run this, as a user, I'm looking at this, I have no idea what the price is of each one of these. So let's go ahead and add the price in. So we'll go ahead and say, before that we'll say price, so plus item 1 price. There we go. Plus there. Copy that, paste it here. Oops. Let's copy this part. Paste that there. Change this to item 2. Change this one to item 3. And then run our program. So now I can see the price for each one. I know what I want. I can say, give me the A2. And that takes 6 quarters, so I'll put in 6 quarters. Okay, so that's not good. A2 should be 6 quarters. So let's see what's going on here. If we look down here, A2, if it's greater than or equal to item 2 price divided by 25, 0.25. So let's see. A2. It's greater than or equal to item price. So let's see what's happening here. This is where I can start debugging, which is a very useful tool. I'm going to go ahead and add in a breakpoint. And I just do that by double-clicking over here on the side. And then I can debug this. So it's running, asking me for an option. I said A2. I said 6 quarters. I hit enter. Now notice how this came down here. And it shows me my user input right down here is A2 and my num of quarters is 6. So if I want to step through this, I can go ahead and step over this if, and it comes to the next else if right here. If I step over that, so see how it's entering into this? That means it worked. This was true. User input does equal A2, as we can see here. And step over this, and here we go. We've got num item 2 price is that, num of quarters is 6. This is A2. So let's go ahead and step into that.
Exactly. And then a lot of the times APIs may not even be open. You might have to sign up. So just walk me through your logic. That way I can kind of figure out what sign up, and they would give you a key. And
you know what?
The API key would be for your account. So that way, when you make a call, you say, "Hey, give me my picture."
It worked. Maybe I just mistyped something the first time. But that's how you debug. That's a super useful tool if you don't know what's going on. It's useful as you can add in console.writelines everywhere. So I can go ahead and I can add in like console.writeline. And I can go ahead and log out. This is going to be log out. I run it. I put in A2 for 6. It tells me that it is 6. 6 is what's getting logged out. So I'm getting 1 quarterback. That's not matter. Let's see why I need quarterback. So I'm getting quarterback. I should be getting no quarterback because it costs 6. Quarters equals no quarters. Dot convert to int. So let's go ahead and log out this. Let's see what this evaluates to. So console.log, console.writeline. Pass that in there and run this. So I'm going to select A2 to get back to that same path of execution. I put in 6. So the first one that got logged out was 6, which is right here. Let's take a look at this path. So console.log, that's 6. And then convert to int item 1 price divided by 0.25. When we convert it to int, for some reason, we're getting 5. Let's see. Item price divided by. Well, let's go ahead and see what happens if we console.log out. Console.writeline. Console.writeline. let's go ahead and take a look at item 1 price. Oh, I found the issue now. I just realized what the issue is. The issue is that I'm using item 1 price instead of item 2 price. So that is accurate. This needs to be item 2 price. And that means we should probably update this one to item 3 price. There we go. So let's delete this line out. Don't need that anymore. Don't need this log.